Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and in this episode, we sit down with Luke Oseland. Luke is an amazing creator who has made a ton of amazing magic, but that is not what we talked about in this session. We talked so much about public shows, putting them together, how to do it, how to work with other people, and so many more. He's got 2 Fringe shows that are happening this year at the Edinburgh Fringe. He has done it a bunch of times before, and he is a really, really creative performer. So we talked about how to make a show, what goes into it, and specifically how to make a show that has a theme, something that makes sense from beginning to end. This was an absolute blast and really informative for anybody who is trying to produce or create their own show. Here it is, a wonderful conversation with the one and only Luke Oseland. Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and we are here with Luke Oseland. Luke, how are you?
Yeah, mate. Good, thank you. How are you?
I am doing awesome. Pumped to chat with you and across the pond. What time is it over there?
It's just gone 10 p.m. It's like 20 past 10.
Cool. You're drinking an old fashioned. I'm drinking flavored water. So we are good to go.
Ready to roll.
Yeah, pumped to chat about some of the stuff that you've done and been up to. I want to get started at the beginning. How did you get started in Magic?
Okay, really good story. Well, I think so. I think I've told a lot of different versions of this, and actually in a show that I was recently doing like a close-up show, and it was part of the show, sort of how I got into Magic. Truthfully, I think and probably the most boring answer is I was just given a Magic set by my grandparents when I was like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
When I had like toys growing up, I was never a kid to play with toys unless the toy could do something. So, for example, it was like if we have like Airfix in the UK, which is like a model plane set, and you build a little plane, or like Warhammer, you build something, or a science experiment kit where you make things happen, and then a Magic kit. What I've found, I think, is the only toy that brings more entertainment value to more people than just the user. So every other toy, the only people that get sort of enjoyment out of it is the person playing with it. Or maybe, I guess, video games, you could argue people watch at. But Magic is the one where you learn this thing and then you get a wave of joy from sort of other people, which I think is really cool. And it's not relevant, but that's why I was into Magic anyways. And then growing up, when I was about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years old, Penn and Teller Fool Us, the first season of it came out.
Wow.
Just as I was sort of really getting into Magic. And I loved that show. There was a lot of Magic on TV when I was getting into it, like Dynamo, Troy, and I really enjoyed all of that. And then Penn and Teller was the one that stuck with me because you got to see so many different varieties of Magic, and it can help you sort of zone in on one. And I was super obsessed with it, which was then a very full circle moment because I went on it a year ago, or last year, or whatever. But then I entered a Magic club called the Young Magicians Club when I was 10 years old. And I did that from 10 to 18. It's a great club. I did the full 8 years there, literally joined on my birthday, left on my 18th birthday, and then went straight into the Magic circle. So yeah, that's how I got into Magic.
Awesome. Was there a moment where you decided to take it seriously? Like, obviously there's a lot of kids and even, young magicians that like doing it and sort of playing around with it. But that's sort of another thing to decide to pursue this and do this. Do you remember when that happened?
Yeah, I think in my head, to go back to talking about toys, there was always a moment of kids would get like a toy fire truck or something and say they want to be a fireman. And for me, I saw a Magic set and I was like, oh, that is a career. I always knew I was going to do something in it, but I wasn't sure what that was, whether it be an actual Magic or something else in theatre. And I was sort of into performing when I was younger, and I dropped out of it completely and just focused solely on the creating side of it from sort of when I was like 14 through to honestly being like 18 or so. I think I was 18 when I decided I sort of wanted to venture into performing, but I would never do any gigs or anything like that. I would actually shy away from performing if I could. And then I sort of realized actually it's really fun performing. And I took it seriously as a performer when I was like 19. So actually only like 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago, I was like, I actually want to do this as a career. I've never had a proper job. I've always done something in Magic, whether it's selling tricks or now performing more so. But I'd say there was sort of 2 moments. There was one moment pretty well, I was about 14, where I sort of realized I wanted to be a magician when I was older. I realized this was like a career. I just didn't know what it was I was going to do in it. Or maybe it was to do magic, but in a different way, like doing special effects on TV or something else. And then I sort of thought I wanted to be behind the scenes, and I actually got a taste for performing and got that bug when I was about 19. And that was the moment when I was like, I want to really, I want to be touring. I want to get into doing ships or stand-up and stage shows. So there was sort of 2 moments there.
Cool. I want to hear a bit about the Young Magicians Club. I think I have been vocal about disliking a lot of magic clubs in North America because they are not, well, they're just a place for older gentlemen to gather and not do magic tricks. And your magic club experience is the Young Magicians Club, which sounded great, and then the Magic Circle, which obviously I know a little bit about. Can you tell me a little about the Young Magicians Club? Like, what did you guys do? What was it all about?
So in the UK, there's, in the same way that in North America there's so many magic clubs. The Young Magicians Club is the only one that will let anyone sort of under the age of 16 into the meetings. And it's also only for young magicians. So it's from people between 10 to 18. It's ran by the Magic Circle. It's hosted at the Magic Circle. And it used to be ran by a gentleman Kevin Doig. He wasn't a professional magician. He just liked magic. But he ran it pretty well whilst I was there for the first 5 years. It sort of dropped off a bit. Membership numbers seem to go down. But we had some really good lecturers in. I mean, like Teller came in to do a workshop once. I think it was probably, from what I've heard, more or less the equivalent of like Tannen's Magic Camp is in the States, except Tannen's Magic Camp only goes on for a few weeks. And this was once a month. I was held once a month on like one Saturday or one Sunday every month. We would have this meeting and you'd get 3 workshops. And it was absolutely fantastic. And it was now run by Harry de Cruz, and Ed Hilson, who are 2 fantastic magicians, could not be in better hands. I'm doing a workshop there next month, actually, which is really fun. And I'm really excited to go back there as a tutor now. And that's like full circle moment. But it's a really good club. And then the Magic Circle is good. It's definitely, I don't know, I've been going less and less to the Magic Circle these days, but that's mainly because I travel quite a lot. I'm never really there. I actually lived in Edinburgh for a couple of years and started going to the, quote, Edinburgh Magic Circle is what it's called. It's not affiliated with the Magic Circle. I genuinely, and I will happily say this on the record, I think that Edinburgh Magic Circle is the best magic club in the UK easily. It's taken on such a different level because you're right, most magic clubs are a bunch of old people meeting up. Our club in Edinburgh, the average age it's still not young, but it's under middle age, I'd say. It's under 50 for the average age, which is insane. We all meet up at a brewery once every couple of weeks, which is more fun. Not everyone drinks, but certain people do, and it makes it a really nice vibe. Everyone leaves their egos at the door. There's not really any sort of like showing off there. And we all are just quite good friends. Everyone voluntarily hangs out for drinks after. We go to a different bar. The lectures we get there are absolutely unreal. Yeah, that's genuinely, just going to say it on the record, I think it's the best magic club in the UK. And I've been to most of them. I've done tours around the UK doing lectures, and I know what they're all like. And genuinely, Edinburgh Magic Circle is on top.
God, it makes such a big difference to have a, magic club where people have good magic. They actually want to perform and share, and they actually want to like hang out with each other and like spend time with each other. Like, makes such a huge impact. And so you guys would have at the Edinburgh Magic Circle, you guys would have lectures, and then you would just like, go to the pub and hang out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I went up. So I'm currently living down south near London, but I spend quite a lot of time in Edinburgh because we have a company based up there, which we'll talk about later. And I went up the other day because we had Michael Amar and Luke Jamay lecturing within like 3 days of each other. So I was like, okay, I can just take the trip up there. But genuinely, the lectures that are there are really good. And then also there's a classic like social nights of just hanging out and chatting about, magic. And there's like one post Blackpool where everyone talks about what they bought at Blackpool. But it's just a really nice group of guys and girls. And it's a fairly big club as well. It's like 60 members or something, which for UK clubs is up there. Awesome. Yeah, it's really fun. And they're all supportive.
Cool. It's good to have something like that. Talk to me about, so obviously this moment comes, whatever, 18, 19, you get the bug for performing, and you never had a real job or a job that isn't magic. And at some point you're like, okay, this is what I want to do, not just creating, but performing. So then what? Like, how do you make that happen? Were you just like, let me just rent a venue and sell some tickets? Did you start like, how do you even almost go from like 0 to 1?
Yeah, sort of. So I grew up in a county called Hertfordshire, and the town I live in is about half an hour outside of London. And there is a lot of opportunities in London, but there's also a lot of competition. And I'd always taken a liking to Edinburgh as a city. As a city as a whole, there's a really good creative vibe there. And also because they have the Fringe Festival once a year.
Yeah.
And then I did a lecture at the Edinburgh Magic Circle, and I met a few of the guys there. And on that night that I was doing the lectures, randomly I went, I think I'm going to move to this city. It's really nice here. And about a month later, I packed up my car and just moved to some random sublet in Edinburgh, because I figured there's not that many magicians in Edinburgh. There's not many professional magicians there. Surely it's better to be like, if I'm going to start out, it's better to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond.
Yep.
I had a bit of savings at the time to support me through the months, and I was still putting magic out on my company's website as well. So I had that sort of running on the back burner, and I just started taking any gig I could at the time. So I was doing like kind of shitty gigs. I was doing like nightclubs and restaurants and bars. You know, no shame against doing those kinds of gigs, but they weren't like, I wasn't doing the corporates. You know what I mean? And I'm still not really, but I was taking literally any gig I could get. Just for the sheer like fun of it and just to get my name out there. And then Edinburgh Fringe came around. I did that for the first year. We had the idea to do Insane Magic, which we'll talk about, and we did that the next year. And then I sort of just dived into this sort of fringe theatre thing. And yeah, just putting shows up on sale. I just thought, well, if I can just do a show, like I sort of had the material. I was working on stuff all the time. I spent about a month or two, pretty longer, probably about 3 months, where I just did loads of stand-up comedy gigs, because in Edinburgh is such a good comedy scene, and there's at least one, if not like 5 comedy nights on per night. So it is actually feasible to be doing like 4 to 5 spots in a show a week. And so I just spent a few months just getting that flight time in. During Edinburgh Fringe, you could do up to 80 performances a month. So getting that flight time in was really important.
Yeah.
And then just still doing any gig I could, really.
That's awesome. I want to ask one clarifying question, which is like, first of all, bonkers to just pack your stuff and move to a city. I mean, I know people do it, but it is just like totally bonkers. So rad that you did that. When you say, look, I coach magicians on the business, so I am pretty aware about what it means to like take any gig that you can get, especially in getting people started. But I know that when someone hears that, they're like, but how do you get a gig to take? Like, and so you go to a brand new city and then you're like, I take any gig I can get. Like, where are the gigs coming from? Is it like gig sites? Or are you just like chatting with everyone and handing out cards? Or are you just like going to pubs and saying like, I'll perform here? Like, what did that mean to even get those first few gigs?
It's sort of a mix of stuff. So I have a lot of people ask me, I'm quite good at blagging my way into things. And my Instagram, I genuinely think, is one of my best assets. I don't have a lot of followers, but it looks fairly professional, right? Like the profile picture looks good, the bio looks good, all my posts look all right. None of it's like absolutely mental. Yeah. Also, I'm followed by quite a lot of like fairly notable people, which also helps. And I basically just started following, because at the time I was writing a show called Drunk Magic. So my sort of clientele, I figured, was like stag do's, hen do's, nightclubs and stuff like that. And I just started reaching out to them saying like, hey, I'm happy to do this if you want like a magician to come in to work the queues in nightclubs, because there's people are bored out there. You know, they've got to wait in a queue, especially in Freshers Week at the universities. They've got to wait there for like an hour. And if the wait is too long and there's nothing happening in the queue, they might just leave. So it's worth having someone there to keep that moving. And then once you get one, it's easier to say to other people, well, I've done this in the past, I've done this. So it sort of just stems from there. And then of course, like the gig share websites. Yeah. So at the time I was advertising that I did like close-up stuff. Now I won't advertise that I do that, because it's not the kind of magic that I want to move into and the kind of gigs I want to get. But at the time it was more just like just putting my name out there. Again, doing all of these like open mic nights and stuff, which you don't get paid for, the comedy stuff, but it puts you out there. Someone might have an idea. And then when you start doing things like nightclubs and restaurants, someone will see you there. Like the videographer will see you who works a lot, and they'll say, "Oh, do you want to come and do this gig that I'm videoing?" I could tell them you'd be a really good asset for the video they want to create. And so it sort of just stems from there, and you start building up those gigs each month.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about the Fringe, and particularly Edinburgh Fringe. You know, there's obviously Fringe festivals everywhere, all over, you know, North America and Europe, and you know, there's a handful of them. Edinburgh is obviously one of the better ones.
It is the biggest one. It's the biggest one. It's not necessarily the best, depending on who you are, but it's the biggest one.
No, you know, yeah. I mean, look, a lot of people say it's the best, but yes, for sure it's the biggest one. Yeah. And depending on which of the Fringe festivals you're going to, like, some of the economics are brutal. You know, you're like, people are like postering for weeks and like running around, hiring people to hand out flyers so that they can sell tickets to shows and like all of these wacky things. And that being said, I would say a huge chunk of the magicians that I know that have done Fringe festivals end up being awesome because they got to workshop their show for live audiences. And very few of the magicians that I know are profitable doing those Fringe festivals or majorly profitable doing them. So I'd love to hear about, like, how'd you get the spot? And then what was the economics of it, you know, then and even now? Like, is it something that is great, super profitable, awesome, super fun, or like, no, great opportunity, don't make any money, but, you know, a rocking good time?
So yeah, you have to think about why you want to do it, right? There's a lot of reasons people do it. One is to work in new material. For example, if you're wanting to work in new material to then take onto cruise ships or take to corporate clients, you can't be just testing out new material. But a Fringe is a great place to do that. You know, you're doing at least more or less one show every day for a month, which there's not a lot of opportunities where you can do that and where they'll let you try out new material. So that's one reason to do it. And if you did that and you were making a loss, it's an investment in yourself to work on that new material. You know, you'd pay £2,000 for a trick. Why wouldn't you pay an investment of £2,000 to have a show that's then ready by the end of the Fringe and have it worked in? So that's one reason you could do it. Another reason would be to get your name out there. So instead of like flight time working material, just to get your name out there, get people to see it, inviting people to your show. Yes, it's a bit harder at the Edinburgh Fringe because it's so diluted. And I think there's a lot of people that go there thinking they're going to get discovered somehow by a BBC or by whatever company, which isn't as... It's not necessarily going to happen these days. But, you know, never say never. And then the third reason you do Fringe is to make money. And genuinely, a lot of people do the Edinburgh Fringe and they make money. And there's so those are three reasons, and you have to really think about why you want to do it. I think the first time I did it, I didn't really know why I wanted to do it. I knew I wanted to perform, so for me it was like getting flight time, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I sort of just, it was something I had in the back of my head that I wanted to do, and I potentially saw it as the thing that I could do like every year, which I am. I'm on coming up to my fourth year now, which is mental to even think about. So you have to think about why you want to do it. And as I say, I think that if you do lose money, but you come out of it with a show, a lot of people, they might just do a show and not improve it. But yeah, if you come out of it with a show, it's so worth it for the sake of whatever, a couple of grand or however much you lose, or more or less. But I also think that there is a misconception that like everyone that does the Fringe loses money. There's a lot of people that sort of, you really have to give it your all. And there's two types of, for people that don't know, at the Edinburgh Fringe, you can do free Fringe or paid Fringe. At the paid Fringe, there is, most people probably lose money doing the paid Fringe, but I genuinely believe that's because they might not be giving it there, or they might not be putting genuinely 100%. When you actually think about putting 100% into it, are you? Because yeah, your show is only an hour long. You could be out there. I know there's a lot of prep that goes into doing a show or whatever. There's no reason why you can be out there flying for 6 hours a day. That's giving it 100% and networking at night. And yeah, it's tiring, but you know, if you really put 100% into it, there's no reason why you should be losing money, really. But as I say, most people do lose money, and that's fine. But where was I going with that? Is it profitable? If you do free Fringe, yes, it is. You can go to free Fringe, and you can do a free Fringe show. You can walk out of it with £6,000, £5,000, £6,000, which is, you know, however many dollars. If you're in the UK, you can drive up to Edinburgh and you can stay at a friend's house,
right,
or you can stay in a hostel or a student accommodation, and you can keep your costs under £3,000 for everything, then yes, you can make money from it. You'll make that £3,000 or whatever. Most people definitely don't make money. Obviously, as I keep saying, we do make money. I also most of the time live in Edinburgh, so there's sort of accommodation cost, which is there.
And also maybe people know you, and that's their chance to see you perform. And
yeah, people do. I definitely have like locals that come see me because they know I'm sort of in the area. They might have seen me at a club or whatever. I have a bit of notability of being like a local there, even when I'm not there, which is good. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to explain, but if you have a reason for doing it and you want to do it, come do it. You'll have the best month of your life. Even if you lose money, you'll have genuinely the most amazing time. You'll meet amazing people. The networking opportunities. I think everything that I've gotten work-wise has probably come from that first Fringe festival I did. I had 9 months of cruise ship work that came off the back of one of those Fringe festivals. I had another cruise ship agent sign me from a Fringe festival. I think almost all of my work comes from that. TV companies come to us. Loads of stuff, and also like corporate gigs and stuff will contact us because it's easy for them if they've already seen a show. So you will get work from it. It's not all like imminent. Even if, for example, you make a loss, like if you make a loss from the Fringe, you might get work off the back of it that then builds it up. You might get, if you make a £2,000 loss, you might make £5,000 to £10,000 after it from people that have seen you there. So it depends how you think about it.
So my last question about the Fringe, and then I want to talk a little bit more about the magic, is I know different places it works differently. Some you have to submit, some it's a lottery, some it's a this. How does it work for Edinburgh Fringe?
So Edinburgh is a massive Fringe festival. A lot of Fringe festivals, like for example, Brighton Fringe, LA Fringe, I think there's one in Toronto as well. Yeah. A lot of those Fringe festivals, I feel like people don't know that the Fringe is happening.
Yes, that's true.
Whereas Edinburgh, everyone knows it's happening. Edinburgh's the biggest one. Everyone in Edinburgh knows it's happening. Everyone comes from all across the world. People really travel in, whereas most of the other Fringe festivals, there's not much tourism for it. It's more just locals and stuff that might know about it. But Edinburgh, everyone travels in. Every venue that can be a venue is a venue. So there's all different ways you can perform it. As I said, there's free Fringe and paid Fringe. The first thing you do is you have to find yourself a venue, and normally that comes through talking to a company. So whether it's a free Fringe company like Laughing Horse or PBH Free Fringe, you would talk to them first, you would tell them what your show's about, and then they would say, hey, we like your show. If they like it, here's a list of venues that might work for your show. Now, PBH, for example, and somewhat Laughing Horse as well, they both work on a sort of, you build yourself up. So you ask for a venue, and in the first year you do it, they might not give you as good a venue as you might get in future years. There's 4 big companies, and there's another few. The 4 big ones are Good a Balloon, Pleasance, Underbelly, and Assembly. They're the big 4. Normally, most of them won't take new artists. That's not to say they won't completely if you're a new person, but they tend not to for whatever reason. And then on top of that, you have Just a Tonic, Greenside, C Venues, and The Space. Or I'm not going to get any more. The Space, and there's one more, which I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of paid venues and sort of pay what you want venues as well. And the same deal, you contact them, tell them a bit about your show. If they like the idea, they'll give you an offer. And normally the offer is somewhat along the lines of there'll be a set guarantee price that you have to pay them. And they'll either take that or a percentage of your show, of your ticket sales, whatever's greater. And a percentage will normally be between 30 and 40% or 30 and 45%. And that's the percentage that they take, either that or the guarantee. And in return for that, they give you the venue with, microphones and lights.
Wild. Okay, so it's still like a submission process, and someone has to say that they want you, whether it's the free or the paid. Someone has to basically say, yes, we definitely want them.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's talk about the making of a show. I'm going to ramble for a minute, and then I'm going to pass it off to you. So I know you've made a couple shows like Drunk Magic and Insane Magic. I hope I'm getting those right. And some smaller ones. And really 2 or 3 things that I want to say about this, and then I'm going to pass it off to you. The first is, I think a lot of magicians that I talk to, they want to put together a show. And what that means for them is they want this brilliant through line with a message and a this, and it kind of rhymes with a Darren Brown or an In and of Itself or whatever. And my advice to him is usually something along the lines of just put together some banging magic and like, let's start there. And obviously you can make the first and last trick relayed or some other, through lines, but you don't need a message that like flows through the show. So that's sort of one element that I want to chat about. And then the second is I want to talk about how you're actually building it and putting it together and your thoughts on how to put together a show, because I think a lot of us, like I work predominantly in the corporate space, which basically means that I do the same show. Like I could change it up, but it's better for me to get more jokes and better bits and continue to see different audiences versus like if you do the Fringe every year, like people are going to come back and see you, which means you want a new show with a new concept and new magic, which probably makes my show funnier, but you better at magic and making magic all the time, because I don't add new magic to my show all the time, but you're constantly are. So like getting a trick from 0 to 1 and like up and presentable, like you're probably much better at than I am or someone else who's been doing the same show, for however long, because you do that more often and you've done it multiple times. So I wanted to sort of start on that first bit about a magician's looking to like put together a show. Can you give some guidelines for what that looks like?
So I completely agree with the statement of like, just do good magic. Like that is for any magic show, unless it's some really wacky contemplative, is that the word? I don't know. Unless it's some really weird thing, the number one thing should be just do good magic. If you don't think a trick's good, don't do it, right? And if people don't think a trick's good, don't do it. Just do good magic. That's what people want to see. That's what people go to a magic show to see. Yes, you can be a comedy magician, but you're still a magician. You're more a magician than a comedian. Just do good magic. Then the whole narrative thing, I think, look, if you start with material, some kind of narrative will find itself. Now, also, it's good to know that on cruise ships and for corporate shows, you don't need to have a through line or something. No one's there to hear about, your grandparents' wristwatch that you treasured forever. No one cares about that. They literally just want to see good magic. They've had a couple of drinks. They just want to see something good and a visual as well. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. We focus on the thing you're saying about like sort of burning through new material as a Fringe act is definitely a thing. And also a lot of touring shows will feel that as well, because they'll complete a tour and then they've sort of done every venue they can and realize, oh, I need to do another tour, but I need to change my material. And we're on our third year of Insane Magic now, which is our sort of flagship show that I do with Elliot and Cameron Gibson. The first year, it was all new. And one thing we kept on asking was, is it insane enough? Insane Magic, for anyone who doesn't know, is a family-friendly magic show that is just fast-paced and packed to the brim with insane magic. There's no narrative, as it were. The whole premise of the show is just to show you as much cool stuff as we can in that hour. There is normally some kind of full circle moment where, as you said, a trick that we do at the start matches up with the end, but there's no like major through line. There's a couple of emotional bits and there's peaks and troughs, but it's not a theatrical masterpiece in terms of storyline by any means. It's just a lot of good magic. And the first year we did it, it was all new. We actually didn't do any magic that any of us had really done on stage before, because we wanted it to be new for the show. And then the second year we did Insane, so the last Fringe just gone, we also said we wanted it to be completely new, which I don't know why we did. Because, people come back to your show, but it is also largely a bunch of people that haven't seen your show before. Yeah. This year, we sort of came to the conclusion that actually, let's just do the best stuff we can. And if it happens to be new, it happens to be new. If it happens to be something we've already done, it's already done. But there's no pressure on, if we have a really new trick and a trick that's a bit older, but a really new trick isn't quite as good. It's also a thing, obviously, like every trick takes a bit of working in to get it right. That's fine. But if you can sort of see from a premise point of view which tricks can be better, and there was no pressure on that. So this year, we're just solely doing our best material. And when it comes to writing shows nowadays, which I think is what you asked originally, I'm getting there. Mm-hmm. When it comes to writing shows nowadays, we start with a short brief, whatever the show is. You should be able to sum up your show in 1 or 2 sentences. So for Insane Magic, it's a family-friendly show a fast-paced show filled with insane magic and mayhem, and it's funny, whatever. So I'm writing a new show at the minute called The Magic Hangover for this Fringe. And the premise of that is that it's basically The Hangover crossed with a magic show. So the premise of the show is that I don't remember what happened the night before, and the audience helps me work out what happened. And it's a really nice, there is actually a nice narrative for that. And that was the other way. I sort of came up with the premise first and then put the tricks in. But if you've never written a show before, it's good to have some kind of premise for a show, some kind of theme, but then you can just slot in your best bits or your material. And I think that the first thing is that if you want to do a show, you're better off doing any show than not doing a show at all. Right? So you're better off just getting on stage instead of thinking and saying to people, oh, I really want to do a show at some point, and never doing it. You're better off just getting on stage and trying out material. And your first show can be called The Magic Show, and it can just be magic. It doesn't need to have a narrative. Or it can be called My Best Tricks or whatever. And the theme of the show can be your favorite magic tricks. My cruise ship show, the whole theme of it is my favorite magic tricks. There's no narrative other than I think these tricks are good, but that is a narrative in itself. So I don't think you need to have some kind of emotional, your dad doesn't need to have died for you to put out a magic show, is what I'm trying to say.
So first of all, helpful and refreshing, to hear that take. I'm going to double click on it a little bit because I think while maybe a lot of people are relieved to hear that you don't need this brilliant narrative, I think one thing that sticks out about the shows so far, Drunk Magic, Insane Magic, The Magic Hangover, maybe other ones that I don't know about, is that even though they don't have a narrative necessarily, they seem to have a theme. And there's probably, like, my show, corporate audience, it doesn't even have a title. Like, I'm just doing my 8 tricks. There's some things that are callbacks and things, but, like, it doesn't even have a title. And when I think about making a show, this is sort of the part where I know that me and other people have gotten stuck. And I've done this before. I made a show called, I don't remember. It was like Improbable or something. Anyways, and the whole show was about things that were like not likely instead of being not possible, which is like, okay, it's like, it's not that interesting, I guess. So if there doesn't need a through line, how do you establish a theme? And then more on that is like, if the answer to how you establish a theme is just like, whatever's tickling me, then like, how do you make sure that that theme plays in? Like, are you going over every script and being like, how do I make this drunk or more insane? Or like, how do you pick a theme, and then how do you make sure the magic matches with the theme?
Okay, yeah. So I think there's a few things. I think if you are doing a Fringe festival, it is important to have some kind of USP or theme.
Yeah.
So Drunk Magic, also one thing which we do is here's a little nugget of advice. Every show we do, we call it what it is, right? So Drunk Magic is very easy to understand what that is. The Magic Hangover, not so bad, but it's sort of easy to understand what it is. Insane Magic, you know exactly what you're going to see. It does what it says on the tin. And I think that's why these shows have been somewhat successful as well. Whereas if you're doing, a show in your country, town, you don't need to worry about that because you've not really got any competition. So you can just do a show.
Yeah. How do you hone in on a theme, or are you just picking what tickles you?
Right. So that's a really good question. I think I have no answer for that. It should be something that you enjoy, firstly. So when I was doing Drunk Magic, that was what I enjoyed at the time. I enjoyed partying and stuff. And I was like, well, I'm going to do a show about me going to parties, which is what the show was. Insane Magic was just a title that sort of had in the back of my head. And I remember the exact time we spoke about it, me, Cameron and Elliot, where we'd just been to see a magic show, which we didn't think was very good. But one thing they had done is they all teamed up and they shared their resources, which is super important, because then you can do a bigger venue, you can spend more on marketing, you can bring a bit more variety to a show by having more than one performer, and people will just go to see a show over another show if there's more people in it. And we were sat having some beers, and I sort of had the title in the back of my head. I was like, I've got this idea for a show. Why don't we just call it exactly what it is, 1 hour of insane magic? And then we started cracking on, and we literally almost a week after that Fringe, we started working on ideas for it, and it's a really fun collaborative thing. Anyways, so that's that. But yeah, coming up with a theme is important if you can, and then revising the script is exactly it. With Insane, one thing we always say is it insane enough? And that's like constantly on the back burner. Like I get that tattooed. It's one thing we always ask ourselves. And then with the Hangover example, which I'm writing at the moment, I'm constantly looking at the script, being like, does that work, or am I just shoehorning it in? And with every show, I think is something like that. For example, I've been doing more or less the same material for the last 2 years, and none of that's in this show. And it's might be one of the first shows I've done where I've not had sort of predetermined or pre-worked in material in the show, which is scary for me. But also, I've done that because I didn't want to shoehorn a trick in for no reason. So that's also important, is looking through a script. And then, I think if something's not relevant or if it's out of pocket, it doesn't need to be in a show. But coming up with a theme, just make it something you like, or taking inspiration from something else. Go see theatre shows and see if you see a show and you're like, wow, I'd love to do something like this. You can do something like that. Obviously, don't do the exact same thing, but it's fine for you to take inspiration from it. So just do something that you sort of like, or a show that you would want to see. If it's a show that you'd want to see, the chances are other people would want to see it too.
So I want to try to push through an example that we can make up right now, because I know the parts where I get stuck. And part of the secret of this podcast is people are like, Jonah, how do you ask such good questions? I'm like, well, I just ask the stuff that I'm really interested in, and it seems like a lot of people are as well. So when you're making a show, I think one of the things that I'm relating to what you're saying is that it's really about hitting on a theme more than it is about this brilliant through line that cleverly resolves at the end or whatever. But even the putting it to a theme, I think sometimes I can get caught up. And I'll explain what I mean. Let's imagine I'm making a show called Backwards Magic. I'm like, okay, that's interesting.
Right.
Like, things are going to be backwards. Awesome. So I come out, and the first trick I do, I'm like, most magic happens forwards. This one happens backwards. And I do like a trick where I find a card and then they pick it, whatever. Super interesting. And then I'm like, okay, now I got to do the second trick. And I already said the show is backwards magic, and I already did a backwards magic trick. Like, what the hell do I do now? Like, now do I talk about the history of things being backwards, or do I, like, what the hell do I do? And obviously I'm not assuming that you're going to have the answer to that question, because I just invented this show right now. But I mean, like, a lot of these things, like, you get caught up, like Drunk Magic, and I haven't seen the show, but it's like, okay, you come out, maybe you drink a pint, and then you like do a trick, and then it's like, so what are the next 7 tricks? Like, maybe one of them's beer themed, and then it's like, what now? Like, it almost feels really hard to take this a whole show's worth and make sure that you're not doing ringing that same bell like 8 tricks in a row. So how do you think about it? Obviously, some ideas are easier to do that than others. Maybe Insane Magic is easy. You're like, that's insane, great. But other ones like Hangover is like, okay, we get it, you're hungover, like, now what? Or something like that. So I just wanted to put that made up example of backwards magic that I just made up right now to see how you would answer that. Like, so what's trick 2 and trick 3 and trick 4?
So I'll let you into the secret, which is that the Magic Hangover has been an absolute bitch to write. It's been horrific. It's been such a challenge because of the same reason. I was like, okay, so without going into too much what the show is, I had the idea for what I thought the show was going to be initially. And then I was struggling to get it over 6 minutes, because I was like, after 6 minutes, this is boring. And I then just completely switched up, and I was like, okay, still the same title, still sort of the same premise, but there was a little switch up, and now it flows. And the secret to it was, I just thought about what would the start and what would the end be. And then the middle bit, we can just fill in later, right? It's like, if you're coloring something in, you draw the outline first, then you color it in. You're making a sandwich, you have the bread there, then you put the fillings in. So for me, I was like, okay, let's get the start there, let's get the ends. And then I had the start and the ends, which is the hardest part of any show to do, to have that full circle moment. Not that your show has to have that, but I wanted to.
Nice.
For the show, I actually had to. And then I put in like a nice routine at the start, and then I sort of worked backwards and actually worked into that middle sort of peak point, because the middle also should be some kind of peak. For the backwards magic thing, in my head, the show would have to start at the end of the show, and the end of the show would have to be the start of the show, right? So then once you've got that, you sort of just fill it. You basically write a show backwards, right? If that's your theme, and you run from there. But yeah, it's hard because we've done Insane before, and we've been on the lead up to a show, and it's gotten to, because there's no structure or narrative to the show really. There is a bit, but it's a secret formula which we're not going to tell people. Because there's not much structure or narrative, there has been moments where we've been a month before doing a run of shows, and we've been like, okay, shit, guys, we actually don't have an ending yet. And that's a scary place to be.
Yeah.
But if you can get that knocked out of the park first, the middle bit is easy. You know, in theory, you do your first 10 minutes, people already like you. You've got 40 minutes to not piss them off before you're at the end 10 minutes, and then you're fine, right?
Right.
So in theory, you can do anything in those 40 minutes, and you should be fine as long as you don't lose them. So I would start, if you can, I would do the start and the end. I'd have some kind of theme, and then I'd think about what tricks work. Sure, I had this conversation with my mate yesterday. I was like, sure, if you have tricks that are really good and you just want to do like your best tricks, put them in there, just put them in the middle. You might have to sort of sway the way you perform them slightly to fit the narrative, but that's fine to put your best material in there. Like, why wouldn't you? So yeah, I would, if you can, I would start with a start and the end. But I'm a big fan of mind mapping. Like if I showed you my notepad, I sort of write a theme at the top of it, and then I just spiral off as many things as I can. So for example, for Drunk Magic, I would literally write in the middle of a page party, and I'd write down every object that you'd find at a house party. So it'd be solo cups, drinks, whatever, napkins, stuff like that. And I'd write down everything. And then off of those, I'd write down every trick that I could do with those. And then I normally end up with a bank of about 50 ideas, and I work out what would work the best. Like, because some of them will just be awful, which is fine. But something might stem from it. You write down what would be the best ones, and also what would connect together the best, and what would segue together instead of doing a trick and then putting it away and doing another trick. You know, it's nice to have things that sequence together. One thing we do a lot for Insane is once we have all the routines, in theory, then we normally start with about 80 to 90 minutes of material, and then we cut it down to an hour. This is a thing we learned from Darren Brown in his book. We write every routine down on a post-it note, we put them all up on a wall, and we then just reorder them, right? Which is genuinely one of the best exercises. There is no better and also worse feeling than taking one of those post-it notes and scrumbling it up and throwing it in the bin. Like when you think you're just like, that's just not going to make the cut, and you scrumble it up. So that is also amazing. But if you can start with a theme and you write down as many ideas as you can that could work in it, jot them all down on post-it notes, and then just start trying to format that thing, if that helps.
Super useful. Also, one of the things that I may be reading between the lines to understand is that, like, sometimes to, like, the theme of a show, it may mean what the show is about. It may, in a moment, mean what a trick is about. It may also mean, like, just what the props for a trick is about, but the trick doesn't need to be, like, if Drunk Magic, like a party, it's like solo cup. It's like, okay, I can do chop cup with a solo cup. I don't need to, like, pretend I'm drunk again, or like be at a party again, or I can just, like, it's really more about these things all touching on a theme, excluding the beginning and ending. Like, as long as they are playfully touching the theme, they can touch it in some different ways. Am I understanding what you're saying right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Drunk Magic was pretty easy. Like, I could do an ambitious card routine with a beer in my hand, and it's still on theme. You know what I mean? Like, so exactly. Like, once you have that theme, you can find tricks that will work around it. And yeah, as you said, objects and just tying the narrative. You could pretty much do any trick in any show if it's structured correctly.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, I want to talk a bit about Insane Magic, and specifically what I want to talk about it is putting a show together with other magicians. So Ben Train and I are business partners. We did our Fool Us's together. Sometimes when we do touring shows or anything like that, we do a show together, but it's honestly not really even that true. We end up doing 2 duo tricks in a 90-minute show, and the rest are just our solo acts. And it is hard, man. Like, it is hard to write a show and to write a script with someone else, especially when all of you care. Like, you know, someone going, no, I don't think that's okay. No, we got to do it like this. No. And like, it took us an eternity to write the script and do the blocking for each of our two fool us tricks. And for the other tricks that we do, like it takes an eternity. Do you have any hacks or tips for making a show with other magicians where you're all, working at it together? Does one of you take one role? It's like, I'm the director, whatever I say with this goes, and the other of you takes the magic role, and you trust each other, or you just hammer out everything equally and see where you end up?
Yeah. So I mean, the easiest answer is whatever works, right? However you go about it, as long as everyone's happy, as long as no one's pissed off, you're fine. I'll start off by saying there's pros and cons to working in a team or in a double act or whatever. The pros are, and I think the biggest pro is when you have a good show, you have people to celebrate with, right? What I mean is when you do a solo show and you absolutely kill it, you come off that stage
it's
from
just you
having effectively 100, 500 friends, and you come off and it's just you. And that's actually one of the loneliest feelings, where you've had an amazing show and there's no one around you. The benefit of being in a double act or a trio is there's other people and you all saw it, you all felt it, so which is amazing. The second thing is you're pulling your resources. And what we mean by that is not only, cash flow, for example, right? Like everyone can bring a little bit of money in and then you can do bigger venues. But the venues that we're doing with Insane, I don't know if I would ever be able to play in my career because they're sort of that scale. But because there's three of us, we have more of a selling power, we have more marketing and more of a sellable show, we're able to do that. But also in terms of pulling your resources, we all have very different skill sets on stage and off. So in the show, we are ourselves, but there is definitely like character parts. I'm billed as a stunt magician, which means I do like dangerous tricks and tricks with stunts. Elliot is the sleight of hand magician and Cameron is the mind reader. And that's just how we're building the show. And that's because that's what we know about and that's what we wanted to do in the show. But then also off stage, it's very shared as well. So Cameron, for example, is very good at administrative things and also graphic design. So he's an absolute whiz on Canva. And although we have a graphic designer, if we need a quick preview knocked up to then send to the designer, Cameron can do that and he's very quick at it. Also, we're all fairly competent at website design, which is helpful. But Cameron, for things like writing ad copy and marketing in general, he's very good at it. And then Elliot is a very good performer. He's also got a lot of links in Edinburgh to companies and sponsors, etc., which is really useful. And he's also just very good at magic, and he's very good with methods as well. And then my sort of strong suit is definitely the methods of things. So if we have an idea for a trick, I'll sort of think about it. I have a thing which I say quite a lot, which is if you give me 10 minutes, I'll probably work it out. So if we have an idea for a trick or something, obviously all the tricks are collaborative and we all work on writing them, we all work on designing them, and we all look at them. But I love sort of trying to solve the puzzles and think about that. And also because my background in consultancy, that helps a little bit. But again, it might take one of us to look at something, try to work it out, and the other one bats off of it, and it just works out great. So that's sort of pros. And then the cons are if you split your fee, right? So you split your fee, right? We could sell out 30 shows in a huge venue, and I will still probably make more off of doing a really small solo show for a little bit because there's less marketing. There's I don't have to give anyone else a cut though. We have to pay us three, and then we have to pay our company a percentage. Also, obviously the venue fee, but it means that we're lucky if we come out with 10 to 15% each, right? Of course. Which sucks. But that is how it is, and we wouldn't be able to play those big venues if we didn't do it like that, anyways. So, and there's other cons as well, but for the most part,
what about the making of the magic? Like, obviously, I think it's a little more fun to not sit in your room with a notebook, but instead be jamming out and chatting with people, at least for extroverts. But it also, you have more than every idea. You almost have to sell, to the other two. And you're laughing because you get it, and I can say it because I've, been there too, which is not only every idea, but it's if one in every 10 ideas, lines, jokes, bits, you have to sell the other two people on, here's why we should do it. This is so good. And they're going, no, and you fight. I feel like it takes an eternity to put something together, even just a trick, because you're just not arguing, but whatever back and
Yeah.
forth about it. Do you have any hacks around that, or you guys just fight it out and see where you end up?
There's probably about 5 to 10 ideas for things that should go in a show every day, I reckon. And then things get brought back up. But between the three of us, we probably send 2 or 3 ideas in every day of things that we could do, whether it's a little joke or a little bit. But then one of us might send an idea and we'll be like, that's good. And then we'll start riffing off of it in the group chat. I think our group chat, it's something insane, like 5,000 messages get sent in it every month or something.
Wow.
It's absolutely insane. It's too much. The hacks are, we spend a lot of time together. Me and Cameron, for example, we worked on a cruise ship for the best part of 6 months with each other. So we were able to just knock on each other's doors and sit down there and just come up with these ideas and sort of act things out. Google Docs is a really good asset for script writing, for collaborative script writing. Everyone can be on the script at the same time. We can be having like a laptop party and everyone's looking at the script at the same time. We can be like, no, it should have this word instead of this word. And we are really anal about scripts work as well. And it like down the comedy lines, for example, as well, we will spend 40 minutes talking about one joke. Just
well, that's what I mean about these arguments, right? Is you like fight about what order a joke should be in, or what the best word is, and like it just takes an eternity to get even a trick done, I find. But maybe if you spend enough time together or whatever,
we sort of, to an extent, we've learned how to almost write in each other's voices as well, which is really helpful. I think it's just comes from spending so much time together. If you're starting out, it's going to take a while. But these two guys were already my friends before we started, but we've now, after a few years, we can now sort of write in each other's voices. And then we'll obviously, if Cameron's written something for me to do in a show, I'll obviously look at it and I'll change it a little bit and be like, actually, it makes more sense for me to say this line instead. And this line instead. Is there any little like hacks or anything for... I think if you truly think an idea is really good, you sort of have to stick to it. And you have to... I do agree there is an element of selling it, especially if that idea is going to cost you money. Yeah. But one thing we do quite a lot is one of us will come up with an idea and in theory it might be really good. But you also have to be really good at shutting down ideas because you're all invested, both in time and financially. If you don't think an idea is good and if you don't see it, you do also just have to say, like, we can't do that. That's not going to work. But there's also been times where we've had, for example, me and Cameron had an idea for a routine with a phone, and it was going to cost us a couple of £1,000s to have this illusion made. And we saw on paper it was a really good idea. And then we came to actually doing it in the show. And about 4 shows in, it did need more work and more time, but we couldn't give it that time, sadly, at the time we were doing the show. We did about 4 or 5 shows, and it just wasn't getting any reaction at all. And it got to a point, and we were looking at his prop, and we were like, I think we've just got to kill it. And so we just sort of chucked it under the bleachers, under the seats, and it did feel really harsh because it felt like £2,000 had just gone down the drain. Yeah. And it was also an idea that we were all really passionate about. We thought was going to be really good, and it just wasn't. But none of us saw that in advance.
Of course.
The benefit is, if 2 out of the 3 of us think an idea is stupid, we won't do it, right? But yeah, there definitely is an element of selling an idea.
I will say it's nice that there's 3 of you, so at least the tie can be broken, which is like really
exactly.
Good. For me, the only tool that I had was picking my battles, which is there was a lot of things where I would go, I don't love it, I don't hate it. If you really love it, then we can do it. And I will save my hard disagree for when I really need it. I don't love it, I don't hate it, but like it's good. We can do it, So like that was the only thing that I have done successfully, is to be like, I'll give you this one because I don't have the bandwidth to argue on every last word of this. And if you think that's the right word, I don't, but it's fine. I'll fight about something different. So that's the only other thing that I've done. But yeah, man, it's hard.
I mean, there's a really good example of it in our show is Elliot. Since we've started doing Insane, he does Cards Across in our show. Now, in my head and in Cameron's head, Cards Across is not insane. I don't think it's a good enough trick to go on the show. But He was like, no, I'm doing it. And we're like, you know what? It's your solo trick. We all have at least one solo piece in the show. Like, if you really want to do it and you can keep it to, the 8-9 minutes, it's fine. Do it. And we'll see how it goes. Maybe we'll change it up or we'll help you with it. And he does it. And it's the most convoluted cards across you've ever seen. If you saw the method for it, it's unbelievably stressful to even look at the method for it, let alone do it. Anyways, it gets a really good reaction. If people are crying with laughter, and so now we're like, yeah, all right, you can do what you want. And there is sort of an element of in the solo piece, if it's getting a good reaction, you can sort of do what you want, which is fine as well. That's one way to go about it. Is hide behind each other a bit, give yourselves the opportunity to do what you want to do as well as doing what we all want to do. If there's ever a trick where 2 out of 3 of us aren't in on it, we don't think it will work, but all of us performing it, we won't do it because your heart has to be in it. And if we feel like someone's heart's not in it, we'll be like, why don't you like this trick? Audiences love it. Obviously, if audiences don't, that's a different story. But yeah, for the most part, all the tricks that we do, if they're good, everyone loves it. And if everyone doesn't love it, we end up cutting it at some point.
Cool. Super helpful. Okay, 2 last things I want to chat about before we wrap this. The first is, you mentioned something before we pressed record about like really disliking magicians like buying tricks and not being creative and putting some stuff together. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's so annoying. I think magic is ruined, man. I think the problem is because you can buy so much magic and a lot of magic is readily available, and everyone, when they're learning magic, we all buy tricks. I sell tricks. I'm part of the problem, right? Yeah. I sell tricks to people. But there is then a really fine line of what is available for sale and what isn't. And I feel like every day there's a post on Magicians Only where someone will link a video of Piff the Magic Dragon or Shin Lim or Dynamo or whoever it is doing a trick. And it'll be an Instagram reel or something. And they'll say, hey, does anyone know where I can buy this? And almost every time I commented on being like, not everything's for sale, which I think is super important. If you were a comedian, right, you wouldn't lift another comedian's jokes. You wouldn't ask, for the most part, and it does happen, but you wouldn't ask to buy another comedian's jokes. And in the same way that if you're doing like, if you're a musician, you wouldn't take credit for another, you do cover songs, but you wouldn't take credit for another artist's songs. You would buy songs, but I don't know. It's a hard example to say. I think that people don't understand that you can't buy everything. And every time that I comment this on Magicians Only, I'm met with a bunch of magicians that don't understand what I'm talking about. And they say like, oh, boo, you're going to go cry. Like, we just want to know where we can learn it. Like, no, you can't learn it. Not everything's... And even if you could learn it and you could perform it,
don't do it.
It's not your thing. Don't do it. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. Like, I don't know. We did a show at Blackpool Magic Convention this year. We did our late night show, which is a show which will probably never see the light of day again because we're not massive fans of the show. But we did it at Blackpool as like a one-off special just for fun. And it's a show, that specific show is filled with magician jokes. So it's almost sucker tricks for magicians. They think it's going one way and then something else happens, which is great fun for magicians. And we opened a show with a trick, and straight after the show, we heard people being like, oh, that is going right in my show. We're like, no, we just did it. It's our thing. Don't do it. And they don't understand. They were like, so it gets to a point where you're like, well, maybe I should just do things that other people can't do, which I think for a while is what Shinlin was doing. He was doing the most technically sleight of hand things and these gimmicks that no one else could do, which is fine. A lot of the tricks that I do in, not so much anymore, but there was a point where I was doing a lot of tricks where genuinely it might cause myself a bit of harm or whatever. And to that point, people could not do it because I do a trick where I staple my ass in a show. No one else is doing that, which is good. So it is important to do things that other people can't copy. But I think that there's so much and way too much copying in the magic industry, and just this belief that you can buy anything, that anything's for sale. And if it's not for sale, if you work it out, that you're allowed to perform it. I think that's so wrong. And yeah, so I just wanted to touch on that.
So first of all, I love that. And I no notes, like I agree with every part of what you just said. I want to just double click and say like your gripe is magicians taking stuff that isn't for sale, not magicians buying tricks and doing them. And like what I mean by that is there's a lot of people on this podcast that are like, no one should buy a trick and do it in their show. Like you have to be creative and be original and da-da-da. And like, which is a fair point. I don't know if I agree with that one wholeheartedly, but basically you're saying your like point is not everything is for sale. Like buy a trick that's for sale and do that, but don't buy it. Don't do a trick, work out a trick that's not for sale, that's not yours, and do it. Am I understanding what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Look, if you find a trick that you think works for you, yeah, go ahead, buy it and do it. I'm not going to stop anyone. I do think that people should try to be a bit more creative, or at least stop doing things out of the box. One thing I do hate is tricks that go up for sale that have what's called built-in comedy. I think that's not a term that should ever be a thing and ever be used. I think if anyone that's listening to this podcast is still doing Vanishing Bandana, just cut it from the show right now. There should never be a point in your show where a tape is more funny than you. That should not be a thing. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think there's not many coming out anymore, but there are certainly a lot of tricks that still come out. To be fair, I say this, it's a bit pot kettle black because I actually love the stuff that Blake Boyd puts out, which in fairness, a lot of it is built in comedy and it all absolutely kills in corporate scenes and on chips. So maybe I'm being a bit hypocritical because I didn't really like that. But I think buying a routine and just doing it as is a no-go for me as well. But, hey, if you want to do that. I'm not my judge.
Yeah, cool. Okay, last sort of thing that, a phrase that you said that I wanted to just chat about, which is, if the gigs aren't coming in, create your own gigs. And I think, we talked a little bit about just picking up stuff here and there and doing fringe festivals and things like that. What do you mean about creating your own gigs? How is one to do that sort of thing?
I think, so for me, I'm not a massive fan of performing close-up gigs. I like doing close-up shows. Like I like doing a little show for 5-10 people, but actually walk around magic or cocktail magic. Don't get me wrong. If a call comes in and I'm not busy on a Friday afternoon, I'm still going to do it because it's it's free money. It's stupid to say no to, right? But I really enjoy doing stage shows, as I always have done. I've never really been into doing close up. I do it because I can. But no one's really hiring for stage shows, especially in the UK. The corporate market isn't what it is in the States. We don't have the university circuit like you guys have in the States. The main market for magicians in the UK is weddings, it's just not what I want to do. So you have to wonder, like, okay, well, how can I get those gigs? And it starts with just creating your own gigs, right? So the Fringe Festival, that is creating your own gig. No one's gonna, if you're huge, you might, but for the most part, no one's going to invite you to come over and do your show there and pay you per gig. If you're already there, they might say, oh, do you want to come on this show as well? But for the most part, you have to get there and you have to start putting on your own shows. If the gigs aren't coming in and you have the budget to, or you can find the funding to, put on your own shows, If I felt like I haven't had a lot of work in a month, I just put on a show, right? And it's not easy to sell tickets, but I'll put on some show, and whether it'll be just me or it might be a cabaret or something, and then that might lead to more work, you never know. But I think if you're not getting work, and I think creating your own gigs is so important, and especially creating gigs that are the type of gigs that you want to be performing more. If you want to be performing weddings, go to a wedding fair and do that. That is creating your own gigs. You're drumming up business for yourself. Whereas, for me, I went to do stage shows, so I went to create stage shows. I wouldn't intentionally start doing a residency for the sake of it.
Love it. I think it's super helpful. And I think, it's funny. I coach a lot of magicians, and when they're getting started, one of my gripes is, I'm like, yeah, I'm happy to help teach you how to get gigs. I'm like, what have you tried so far? Like nothing. Like, well, yeah, that'll do it. Right. So, definitely doing something is better than doing nothing. That is for sure. Yeah. Last question, and then we'll get to the little wrap up bits. I almost feel silly asking this because I have heard the answers countless times that I almost scrubbed asking this from podcasts in general, but I thought that I would give it a whirl. You're pretty creative in the magic that you come up with. I know you have some magic books about, visual and creative magic, and you've released some cool stuff. You've got a trick. Give me a sneak preview of a box of condoms that you're sitting beside for a trick that you're going to release soon. So interested in that. Do you have any tips for how you make stuff? And the reason I say I don't ask this question is because basically the answer is the same always, which is you kind of think something's cool and then you F around with it until you made something and then you do it. Is there anything I'm missing?
No, I mean that's pretty much it. Yeah, you sort of just throw stuff together. There's a list of props I'm currently trying to build and currently trying to work out how to build them. But the truthful answer is you just sort of give it a go and make a messy version of it first, and then work out how to neaten it up. One bit of advice which I got from Tom Elderfield ages ago was, however many things it will take to build it, get 3 times as much or 4 times as much. So, for example, there's a trick that I'm working on with a tie at the minute, and I only have 1 tie for it, which is absolutely stupid. So I'm going to go to a store and buy like 5 or 6, and you have to really not be afraid of just cutting them up to work out what the best way to do it is. There's also no harm in having like multiple versions of something, but there's a plank of wood sitting behind me right now, and I have no idea how I'm going to cut it in half. And I think what it will actually just be is I'll sort of just snap it in half, sand it down so I can at least see if the idea works. And then if it works, I can either get it professionally made or get something else. The thing I'm building it in a minute, I probably went through about 6 versions or 7 versions before it became something which I could actually put out, and something which I could build quick enough as well to be able to put out a bunch of, I've got to build like 300 of these, so it can't take me half an hour to make each one. So I worked out a quick way to build it as well. But yeah, you sort of just buy more than, buy however much you think you're going to need, buy 6 or 7 times as much so you can do various versions. Just make it work first and then worry about making it pretty and neat. I think would be my advice.
How many hours a week do you spend like cutting and gluing and magneting or whatever? Like,
it depends on the time of year and how much work I'm doing. It's normally not that much. It used to be like full time, like 6 hours a day. Normally not that much. Right now, I'm spending a few hours a day building these condoms just to get this Murphy's order fulfilled. But then normally not so much. Like maybe like a couple of hours a week that I might be cutting up some. This tie thing, I'm a bit. I'm trying to work out in my head how it's going to work, and I know in my head that actually I'm just going to have to sit there with 10 ties and 10 shirts and just start trying it. But I'm sort of procrastinating that right now.
Cool. It's so funny. That feeling is so funny to be like, I don't know how it works. I know I'll be able to figure it out, but it's a block of like 10 hours that I have to give to this thing, which I'm just like delaying doing because I know it's going to take me 10 hours of cutting ties and being wrong and, all these different things. So
yeah,
pretty funny thing. Okay, we are getting towards the end. There's a couple of quick wrap-up questions for everybody who's been on the pod. The first is about modern magic. So what's one thing you like about the world of magic right now and one thing you don't like?
Okay, one thing I like is that certainly in the UK, there's been a huge shift of people moving to stage performing, which was, it really stopped. There wasn't a whole lot of stage performers for a long time. But in the last 5 years or so, there's been a big boost in it, which I'm really happy about. A bunch of actually kids that are like the Young Magicians Club are now wanting to get into sort of stand-up and cabaret side of things, which is really cool to see people sort of trailblaze instead of just following the standard route of doing these weddings and residencies and stuff like that. So that's something I really like. Something I don't like. Good question. I don't know how I feel about the FISM Online Magic Championship. I don't know how I don't know. I was going to say I don't like it. I don't know how I feel about it. So I'll say.
Can you elaborate a little bit or no?
I just don't. A lot of my friends are doing it, so I don't want to say anything too bad. But I don't really. I think to say that you're a FISM nominee or a FISM winner when in actuality you've uploaded a 15-second video, I don't think you should be able to say that, right? I think FISM's it's
worse. I am a FISM nominee for a magic podcast, and I may
that should not be a thing, right?
So I'm officially a FISM nominee. I may be a FISM winner. I've never submitted anything ever to them, so like I feel you, man. Like
the worst part is, Jonah, I know full well that's going on your website, right? So,
of course. If I win, it is. I haven't decided if nominee is going on my website, but if I win, for sure it is. There's no question about it, right?
Yeah, it's like it's mental. The online Magic Championship is fucking bullshit. I don't support it. That's my statement on it. But I'll probably enter next year. That's the thing. That's the horrible thing about this. Yeah.
You know what? I think just to comment on it, I think that last FISM, when I left it. I loved it and hated it, and I thought it was great and weird and whatever, all these different things. But the biggest thing is it was like, it's so weird that they have all these categories of magic that like almost don't exist. Like, who's doing manipulation acts? Like, just like there's some people doing them, but like it's so not what magic is right now. And I left it being like, there should definitely be something for like people making social media magic or magic TV shows or whatever. And then this came out and I was like, whew. It's like it is strange, and it's funny to see, like, if you've attended a FISM, you have you attended a FISM before?
The Blackpool one, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't really watch it.
Well, if you watch the act, it's kind of like your dad catching you smoking a cigarette and make you smoke the whole pack. Like, you're like, enough coin matrices. Like, I really can't bear to watch another one. And you do see some of the best magic you've ever seen in your life, but you also see some of the worst magic you've ever seen in your life. And that has been true with these online submissions, man. Like, I've seen some really cool stuff, and I've also just been like, what is out there, man? Like, it's unintelligent.
I think if I see one more flat cards, big posters of FISM submission, I'm gonna lose my mind.
Yes.
But also, I don't really think magic should be like an overly competitive sport, and that's because there is that fine line between, like, you can do sleight of hand basing, but you can also do a gimmick that looks 10 times better, but it takes a lot less effort. So I don't think magic is the right thing to be that competitive. It's not a sport, right? It's an art, but it's not a sport. So yeah, I don't know if I agree in FISM as a whole. The online Magic Championships, I'm not a huge fan of.
Well, I love it. That's a nice and spicy take. Last two things. The first is the take-home points. So people listen to us talk for like an hour and a bit now about many things under the sun. If they were to think back to this and remember one thing, or if one important thing stuck with them that you hope really lands with all the magicians based on this conversation, what might that be?
That's a good question. I think we talked about a lot of stuff. I think creating your own gigs is super important. If you're not happy with the gigs you're doing, just create the kind of gigs and go out there and, pretend you're doing the gigs that you want to be getting, right? And then hopefully they start rolling in. I think it is important.
Awesome.
And I hope that's valuable. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what else we talked about. I think also, instead of the thing we talked about with shows, that you're better off doing a show than not doing a show for the most part. So don't be focusing on spending 5 years to perfect your show, because the chances are, it's a whole thing of kicking a ball against a wall, right? You're never playing with a team. If you're constantly writing, constantly practicing this thing indoors, but you have no stage experience, the chances are you would have been better off just doing the stage time instead. So get that flight time in and just get on stage would be the other thing.
Love it. Really helpful. Thank you for that. Last question is the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest that would be a good fit for this kind of conversation. There's 2 catches. The first catch is I haven't interviewed them already. The second catch is you do have to be able to put us in contact. You can't just be like Shin Lim or whatever.
Yeah, right. Okay. Oh, good question. I would say... Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of someone who does something like a bit similar to me, but not too much. I mean, either of my business partners would be great to get on. Elliot Vivio, Cameron Gibson. I think, actually, though, a fantastic person to get on, which is a person which we work with very closely. He works with us quite a lot. He's a stand-in for the show. He's an understudy. Tom Bolton. So Tom is a magician from Durham, which is next to Newcastle in the UK, and he has his own magic venue called the Magic Corner in Durham. And it is sold out all month, every month of the year, pretty much, especially in peak seasons like December and October for Halloween too. But for a business podcast in magic, he would be an amazing person to talk to, and especially about creating your own gigs. This guy does like 3 shows a day sometimes, and they're constantly booked up. And he's a really nice guy as well. He's one of my good mates. Cool. So I think he'd be a really good person to get on.
Love it. Well, Luke, thank you so much. This was super awesome and really, really interesting and cool to get a peek into the stuff that you guys are doing at Insane Magic. So big thank you to you for coming aboard, and big thank you to everybody else for tuning in. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you all next Thursday. Ciao. Well, there you have it. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope, of course, that you learned something. As always, the only way this podcast spreads is if you tell a friend. So if this was a banger episode for you, then tell someone about it. They'll be grateful, and I'll be grateful too. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next Thursday. Ciao.